setting up the mic and turning on the mic. Those are important roles to have. If anybody wants to be involved with the group, let me know. I mean, we're just up here making sure everybody meets up, that the space is available, but this isn't our group. I mean, we're just the organizers. This is your all's group, so you tell us what you want. If you want to participate, help out, whatever you want to do, let us know.
We have a Trello board for topic ideas. It got cleaned up last month, and there's some new topic ideas on there. We're slowly clearing them up. If there's anything that you're interested in that you don't know anything about, but you want to see somebody present on it, throw it in the ideas channel, or what does that column, I guess? And maybe somebody will grab it and present on it.
That's a good idea, though. We should start an ideas channel on the Slack so that people who don't have, look at you, just coming up with ideas.
I do that. Yeah, so check it out, see what's there. If you have any interest in something that's already there, let us know in Slack.
There you go. So you don't even have to come up with an idea of what you want to present on. Just see what people are interested in, pick it up, let us know. You'll talk about it, and we'll rock and roll from there. And again, because we do 2 talks, your talk doesn't have to be an hour long. It can be 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. It's pretty easy. Okay, got some Laravel news.
Laracon US, or Laracon Online. Crap.
Who wrote that?
I did. Laracon Online happened. Heard it was good. I kind of watched a couple of the videos afterwards. Did anybody else watch it at all? It's good?
Yeah, it was pretty good.
I hear the stream was good. Yeah.
I hopped in and I saw the Slack channel was just flying by. And it was.
That's the one thing I did hear. You couldn't really participate in the Slack channel for the longest time. It was just a bunch of messages popping by. So.
I seen it start at 8 o'clock, and then I woke up really early, and I was like, oh, that's 8 o'clock Eastern time.
Yeah. That was my thing. It's like, no, I'm not making this.
Yeah.
Homestead 5.0 was released. Anything special about that?
I don't really know. There's some. I know you can do ngrok now from Homestead.
ngrok. I know they removed support for HHVM, which I don't think anybody cares about anymore.
I think they bumped it to 7.1 too. But I think that's the.
Big thing I noticed, everything's all in Homestead right now.
Oh.
There's no .Homestead right now. All
That was frustrating. There's no more. Yeah, the .Homestead dot.
There was both for a while.
Yeah.
Homestead, .Homestead. Now it's all in Homestead.
Right.
Cool.
That's nice. Forge has an API. If you're a Laravel Forge customer user, you could tap into their API now. I saw that there's a little menu bar app where you can log in and refresh servers and that kind of thing.
And Taylor has started a Patreon. If you need support from Taylor Otwell, the creator of Laravel, you can become a member of his Patreon, and there's different levels, and you get different levels of support. So that's something to check out, especially if you have a company or business that's dependent on Laravel. Shameless self-promotion. Myself, John, and Thomas, who we all remember dearly, we're still doing the PHP Ugly podcast. We just bypassed 1 year of doing our podcast. It was our 52nd episode was a lot of fun. People from other podcasts joined us. It was such a spur of the moment thing too. They started instant messaging me. They're like, "Hey, when are you recording your 1 year? We'd like to participate." I'm like, "Yeah, sure. We're recording tomorrow night." So we all do that one. LaraChat is the LaraChat Live is the podcast for the LaraChat Slack channel, and I'm on that one with a couple other people. That's a kind of a round table. We try to have a special guest on, do a quick 10-15 minute interview with the guest, then we kind of drop into a round table discussion on a topic. PHP Ugly is just John, myself, and Thomas just venting mostly.
LaraChat's pretty cool too, because now that you guys do the podcast now, so it's the video form was always hard to log on and watch the video. Now it's just the podcast.
That's right. Yeah, it used to be LaraChat Live. Used to only be a live video stream. You could go back in and watch the old ones, but we converted it to audio, and now we publish it on iTunes and Google Play and all that. Want to thank our sponsors. The place you're at right now is CARI.net. Appreciate them. They supply the space, the food, the stream. Please show them the respect. When we're done here, make sure you clean up after yourself. If you need to use a restroom or something, it's out the door to your right on your right-hand side. Besides that, everything. Yeah, you have seen. Just so you guys know, people sitting here, we are live streaming, so you may be on the stream in case you have warrants out for your restaurant thing. Diego Dev Group, that's a company John and I run. A lot of us work at Diego Dev. We sponsor the beer and a bunch of other stuff, the podcast and all that other stuff. So, and that's it. We will. So I'm going to do two talks. I'll do a talk on what's new in Laravel 5.4. Marcus and I were talking. Realized we never really did a discussion on 5.4. So literally over like a day, I put together a bunch of slides. I ripped most of them off from Jeffrey Way's tutorial, which again, Jeffrey Way has a whole tutorial on what's new in 5.4. It's free. You don't have to be a Laracast subscriber to watch it. Or you can just watch my talk, because that's most of it. All right, so let me jump into that. So I'll just jump right into that. Yeah, good. And we'll take a little bit of a break between while Frank gets set up, and then we'll socialize. All right. So I've deployed Laravel 5.4. I don't have it running on any clients. I don't have any real applications to running on it. It's just me playing around with it. And like I said, we realized we hadn't done a talk on it, so I figured I'd go through some slides here real fast with you guys. So one of the interesting things that's been added to 5.4 is the Sanitizing Middleware. It's one of those kooky little, if you work a lot with forms, one of those kooky little things that you've always had to do yourself. It's not part of middleware by default. The two things are trim string and convert empty string to null. And it's pretty self-explanatory. If you fill out a form and end user types in their name and a bunch of spaces, when they submit it, it goes to the middleware and it lops off all the spaces at the end of the string. Same thing with the convert empty to null. If there's an empty string submitted, it'll convert it to null and put it in the database that way. Pretty self-explanatory. Laravel Mix, no more Elixir and Gulp. This has all been replaced with Laravel Mix and Webpack. It was kind of a shift. I know they took a lot of inspiration from Vue. Evan Yu uses Webpack a lot, so I think that was a lot of the inspiration. This is one of the more bigger pain points if you're trying to upgrade from 5.3 to 5.4, and there are tutorials on there how to stick with Elixir and Gulp, or if you want to do this migration, how to migrate it. I don't have a lot of experience with this. We're still mainly Elixir and Gulp. Did we convert the one to? Did we convert?
It's 5.3.
Yeah, but I thought you put Webpack on that, didn't you?
Yeah. We're using Webpack, but we already used the precursor.
Yeah.
Thing, so we're still using Gulp.
Yeah.
It's
So
almost like
no more Elixir. It's called Mix, and no more Gulp. They use Webpack. Fluent Routing. This is an interesting one. Not a big fan of it. Don't know if I'll use it, but I'll explain to you what it is. Previously, when you did a route, it's pretty straightforward. You get route get, route post, route whatever you're doing. And then if you have anything you're adding to it, you either grouped, you can put it in groups, or you could do this little name profile. With Fluent Routing, you can this is what it looks like. So you can actually route name profile get, boom. This is also name. You can actually add the middleware and then do your get. Why am I not a fan of this? Just looks for me. I like looking at my routing table or my routes file and be able to see get, post get, delete, patch, whatever it is. I like having it all right here. This kind of starts to, my eyes have to wander a little bit. Not a big deal, it's just personal preference. I don't know if there's any benefit to this new Fluent method, but it's there if you're interested. This was kind of, I wasn't even aware of this one. Resourceful controllers with model boilerplate. So, you do your make controller, you do a tac model onto it, right? And we've always been able to do this. All this did before is made a controller and made a model, no big deal. But now what it will do is in the controller right here, this is a resourceful controller, right? So it knows for show, it automatically injects the model for you. Just a nice little time saver. Obviously, you might not always need it, and you could delete it. It was just kind of cool to see it. What else do we have? Higher order messaging. This sounded so cool when I first read it, and it's not so cool. I mean, it's cool, but it's not as impressive as the name implies. So, collections provide support for higher order messaging. They're shortcuts, is all they are. They're shortcuts to certain functions. These are the functions here. Contains, each, every filter. So what does that look like? So we have our model here for post, right? And we create this method in post called archive. And so we grab our 5 oldest posts into a collection, and we get those in, and now we want to archive them. Previously, what we would do, or one of the methods we could use, is we could do a post each, drop that into a function post archive. I mean, this wasn't a lot of work, but it is a little sloppy looking. Now with that higher higher order messaging, there's a nice little shortcut. Because it's smart enough to understand this, you can now do post each archive. And you see when you do this, it does the archives and sends it to FOSS. This one did as well, but and I reset it between, so I know this works. But so you get to look. These two do the exact same thing. This is just a shortcut. Is all it is. Makes for a lot cleaner code. And again, this works for contains, each, every, filter, first, map, partition, reject, sort by descending, and sum. So you can kind of do that little shortcut to all those. It's just there to clean up your code, really. It doesn't add any functionality. I don't even think it doesn't even really add performance or anything. Just cleaner looking. Real-time facades. We all know that facades is a touchy subject in the PHP world, and whether or not what a facade is. This is actually a pretty cool feature. I don't know if I'm going to use it, but it's a cool feature. So again, we're back in our post model, which for some reason went lowercase. I'm not quite sure, but we're in our post model. I create this little method down here just to do a var dump. So surprise, and it just does a var dump of some text file. So what that means, if you look over here in Tinker, where we would typically, now I didn't create this, if you look at the namespace is app, right? This is this, okay? So when I go to use this model, I just append it with the word facade, the namespace of facades, /app/post. With that, I can now use this function as a facade. It's that simple. There's no real magic there. I'm again, personal preference, not a fan of this. Just how it looks, it just looks suspicious to me. I don't know if I'll use it, but it's cool to have if you're into facades. Laravel Dusk, if you're not familiar with it, it's a new testing platform. It's meant to not have the requirement of Selenium instead, or the need to install JDK. Instead, it uses the Chrome driver, and this simulates your user's interaction with the site. So the big point is it allows you to test a lot of your JavaScript, make sure certain things happen. What's really cool is if something fails, it does a screenshot of the failure, and you can sit there and look at it. So that's there. I think we're almost done. Markdown Mailables, again, exactly how it sounds. You can now use Markdown language to compose emails. The big benefit to that is when it sends out an email, it then sends it out in HTML format, plain text format. You don't have to worry about all that stuff. The Markdown handles it for you. Blade components and slots. I wanted to put together slides for this. I just kind of ran out of time. Interesting idea. It's kind of a play on if you're familiar with Laravel Blade now and how you use extend or include. It's kind of the same thing but different. It gives you a little bit more flexibility. If you're a front-end person or you do a lot of templates, look into this. Again, they got inspiration from the Vue framework and how they use these things they call slots. So check this out. Yeah, not a whole lot to that. Oh, so this is the last slide. Are you ready, Frank? This is going to be the last slide. If you do a migration, one of the things that bit me actually when I was doing my testing is that Laravel 5.4, its default character set is now UTF-8 NB4. That's so you can have poops in your database, other emojis. What happens is you get this error message, specified key was too long, max key length. So there's a couple of fixes you can go in. You either have to know to change the character set, or for databases that don't have that, there's some configuration changes you can make in the application to handle it for you. No big deal. Just it was weird when I went to deploy my first 5.4 app and I saw this. I'm like, hey, I know what I'm doing. What the hell is this? And it took me a little while to figure out why I was getting that. So I think that's it. That would be it. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we will take a quick 5-minute break here while we get Frank set up. Feel free to socialize and bio breaks, anything else you might need. You want my clicker? Yeah. I changed the batteries in there. Do you need to plug in?
Yeah, I probably should.
Okay. Oh, cool. They put that strip there now. Okay. Where's your USBs? Yeah, I gotcha. Punch them again. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
I should be connected actually. So
So you're asking?
because it's gonna throw a splash page.
oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, but go to google.com. Yeah.
I think the crossover is.
Maybe I should disconnect and reconnect.
And that actually, Fan was looking. He was modeling this Dusk app. So he was looking to use Fan, and then he spent about a month on it and realized it was just going off. And it was getting
Open. Do you have Firefox just to open a new browser, because sometimes the splash screen shows up on the new browser. Or I.
Yeah, I'll just do it.
Yeah, it sounds good.
But now that you mention it, yeah.
Yeah, try something like Google maybe. If it's not, well, connected to Firefox. There you go.
Okay.
It's very weird. I don't know.
Excellent.
Sometimes you have Chrome up.
Yeah, maybe if I shut Chrome down and
Yeah, but you don't want to do that. Okay, now you should have much.
I'm not saying yes, but I want to make sure, like I said, we haven't deployed it yet.
I thought I saw somebody,
Yeah, so Jeffrey Williams, it was weird. Jeffrey
Hey, thank you.
It was headless unless he ran into an error. Then it would like pop up on the screen real fast to a screenshot. Yeah.
Right.
Check, make sure you put the room. Go ahead. Oh, yeah. I'll check.
especially as more of the application.
Yeah. I'm always, I mean, I'm actually always been a bigger fan of acceptance testing as a unit test person, because it's like, ultimately that's what C is. Yes, so if that works, you think by default the unit tests are working. I haven't played with it. Frank's Doctrine talk. Frank.
All right. I am doing this talk here on Laravel, using Doctrine with Laravel. I'm a fan of Doctrine. I use it. I did a lot of work with Symfony, so I like a lot of it. It's a very powerful ORM, and only as an alternative to Eloquent. I'm not saying you need to use it. You should use it. It's got its place. Eloquent has its place. My name is Frank Wallen. Just a few things. There's my email address, IRC, Twitter. If you hit me up on IRC, more likely to respond. Twitter, I always forget to go check that, but it's there. All right, what is Doctrine? Well, Doctrine's an ORM like Eloquent, an object relational mapping library. Eloquent was built using the active record design, which is very popular and very useful, but objects are tightly coupled to a database. Doctrine, on the other hand, uses the data mapper pattern, and the entities are very thin and just pretty much can just have be separated from your business logic. Just to continue, where Eloquent models are aware of their connection to the database, Doctrine entities do not. They have no knowledge whatsoever. If you look at an entity, it's only going to have its properties, maybe whatever methods you built into it. doesn't know where it's going. It doesn't really know where it came from. It just has the data in it. So as it explains there, entity objects contain persistable properties, and that's how Doctrine understands how to map the tables, or the data to the tables in the database. Repositories and the entity manager are a very important part of this process. Doctrine strongly uses repositories. Even if you're not directly using repositories, it's using repositories, which is a really nice way of just maintaining your data. In a lot of cases, you're trying to hit your database to get a record that you've already pulled. If you've already pulled it, it's in the repository, and Doctrine can return that to you, so you don't have another hit on your database. The entity manager is really just a sole entity. It's the one that really just takes care of putting the data into the database for the repository. I do want to point out, as I say there, Eloquent is friendlier, definitely. I think any one of us who've used Laravel or spun it up, it's like a grease slide, right? You're going. It's easy. It's pretty easy to get started with. So on the other side of that, it does have its caveats because of that. You get a little stuck with it sometimes. The models get kind of big and clunky, but it does offer ease of use. Doctrine, of course, requires a few extra steps, but it does have greater flexibility. I originally wanted to write up a lot of the powerful features of Doctrine. There's quite a few, but what I'm going to talk about is two that I think most of us go through often and deal with. One of them is database migrations. The next one is the QueryBuilder. So database migrations, Doctrine has an amazing migration system. You can just you define your entity. We'll get into this. It takes a little bit of more work to define an entity as compared to creating a model for Eloquent. But you just run this Doctrine migrations diff, and it can look at your database, and look at all your entities and the mapping, and know which ones have changed and what needs to change, and then it will create the migration for you. Of course, there's no need to write it for yourself, but of course, I don't recommend creating diffs and then blindly letting them go. You should always review. But the rollbacks are very flexible too. I'll get into that a little bit later. I have some examples. The depth can be specified, or you can actually specify a migration as a target. So you can actually migrate backwards, roll back to a specific migration, or you can migrate forward, to a specific migration. So I think it's really awesome, especially when you're debugging, you're testing, you're wondering what's going on with my database, schema. You can step through your stuff very slowly and see how it goes. The QueryBuilder, of course, Eloquent has a QueryBuilder too. Easy to use Fluent helper methods like Eloquent also. It also has an expression helper class. So you can build like these very small little pieces of your criteria, like your equals, your it contains, or it's not null, or in, things like that. You can build these up here with these little small expressions, and then combine them together, usually in a criteria object. The criteria object is really awesome because it's used often for SQL-backed operations. Obviously where, all that. But you can also use it for filtering your collections. So the same criteria object that you use to grab your stuff out of the database, you can use it on a collection of existing ones that you've already pulled. You can apply that same criteria to that collection and filter it down also. I'm not going to go into installing it and setting it up, but I will say that LaravelDoctrine.org, this is an awesome one. This package especially is really, really good. It was almost like like Laravel, right? Drop in and go. It was really pretty. Well, it's not that straightforward. It'd be nice if it were, but Doctrine itself inherently doesn't let you do that. So you always have to do a little bit of configuration. But it's really easy to set it up and install it. And a couple little steps. You just got to do your usual configurations, add your service provider, all the usual stuff. You just follow the directions, you'll be good to go. And you definitely want to install your migrations library support too. So on migrations, here's a couple examples of what you can do with it. There's plenty more. There's your rollback, which will, if you just did Doctrine migrations rollback, it would just go backwards one step. Only if you did a reset is it going to go all the way back. I actually do like what Eloquent does in our migrations, where like if you do a new migration, you now have it's incremented the version, so to speak, and if you do a rollback, it'll just do that one version. I kind of like that, but sometimes I've done that and oh crap, I just rolled back a table, I had some test data in it, I wanted to keep it, now it's gone. But with Doctrine migrations, you can actually just say migrate next and it'll do one step. Migrate previous, it goes backwards one step, and that's it. And then of course the target, which I mentioned earlier, specify the target and it'll go right to it. I can show you some of that tonight too. Creating and retrieving entities. So one of the things about entities is you create it, but it can't save itself. Like as I said earlier, it doesn't know how it's connected to the database. With Doctrine, you actually have to tell it to persist your database or your persist your entity. Well, yeah, persist your entity, and then at some point tell it to flush. So what happens? You can queue up basically a number of entities into your repository or into the entity manager, and then eventually just hit flush and it'll send them all out. What it's going to try to do is what it uses. It's called a unit of work. I think it's a design pattern. But the idea is that it's going to try to squish things down as much as possible into as few hits to the database as possible. So it's going to throw all the inserts at one time, updates at one time, or deletes, or selects, all that kind of stuff. So that way it doesn't, you're not getting multiple hits on your database. And then the best method I have here, I recommend the repositories. Honestly, I think repositories are probably a really good way to go anytime you're accessing your data from your database. It's just going to really help if the more you separate yourself away from that database with your code and your entities, it's going to be a little better in case you need to make any decisions someday and go, well, we don't like MySQL anymore, now we're going to use Postgres. Or maybe you like it, but you don't have a choice, because the boss says we're using Postgres, too bad. Now what? Now you got to go pull all that stuff in the back. You might have things that have been a little too specific. You've written some SQL, and now you're trapped. Well, usually SQL is going to go pretty well, but MySQL is not going to always use the same terminology that Postgres does, and of course, Microsoft SQL likes to go all over not go all over the place, but it certainly likes to digress. So I definitely recommend using a repository. Now the cool thing about repositories is, one thing I will mention is Doctrine does not have a lot of magic, which Laravel and Eloquent offer you. It figures out a lot of things for you on the fly. Well, at least repositories will do that for you when it comes to your entities. So in this case up here, I created this entity up here called Scientist, and I assigned it my name, and I persisted it, and I flushed it. So down here, I get my repository, and note that, and I'm not going to get into it really here, but you can extend and create your own repositories. You can make them very, very powerful. This one here is I'm just saying, hey, this is my model, and so Doctrine's going to give me a working repository wrapped around basically with using that model or that entity. I did not have to write find by first name or even find one by first name. Those are magic methods in the repository. So it's going to actually try to go with the, it knows that find by and find one by are their methods, and then it's going to use first name to say that this must be an attribute in your entity. And so it'll find, and it'll use that to locate it. So it does have some magic like that. So the first one in this case is going to return an array that's only going to have one object in it, but the second one returns just one. That should be pretty clear. Yeah, one problem with this here is you can't see this too well. Entities are, like I said earlier, are very, very simple classes. You can't really see it too well here, but class scientist, I'm not extending anything, I'm not implementing anything, I'm not even using, I'm not even nothing in there, no traits. The biggest part about it is that I do need to define my properties, and I do need to map them. So I've done it here using annotations, and there's all kinds of disagreements on annotations, using annotations like this. Well, you can use YML, PHP, or XML in Doctrine to declare or define your mapping of your properties to your fields and your tables. I like the annotations, and the main reason for that is that when I want to go look at my entity, I can see exactly where and how it's supposed to be mapped in the database. Because there are many times I'm creating eloquent models, and I have these migrations that create all these fields in the background, and I go look at my model, and I'm like, well, what's it got? It's got some methods I've created, but it doesn't really tell me what's in it or how it's connected. Where's the data going? But at least in this case here, I can tell exactly what's happening. I can see how long it is. Well, of course, I have to make some assumptions. The type here could be a string for the first name, and it's going to do 255 characters as usual. So I have to know that. But there might be something more specific about it, and there are more properties you can add. So in this case here, we just do a diff. I can create this entity, do all this stuff here. I do have to specify it's an entity. I do have to name the table. But then I just do diff, and then it creates a new migration for me on creating this in the database, and I migrate it, and you're done. I'm going back to repositories on this. This is actually from Laravel Doctrine ORM on repositories. I thought it was really good. This is, one of the reasons. I just think that repositories are very, very useful. It's just it's extra work, But if if your stuff is going to be very simple, you're not going to be manipulating models too much. You probably don't have to worry about it too much. But if you're really going to be manipulating things or doing some different business logic, put your business logic in your repository. You don't have to put it in your entity. That's what I think I like about Doctrine entities is they are thinner, and which also makes them much easier to cache too. You can serialize and cache them a lot simpler than having something that's just loaded up with all kinds of stuff. Doctrine also supports multiple connections very easily too. You just got to tell the entity manager which connection you want to use, and then that's all there is to it. So retrieving entities using the QueryBuilder. The QueryBuilder is a very, very powerful feature, and Eloquent's very similar, but like it has select, from, where, you can do all that stuff, join, inner join, left join, all that fun stuff. You do have to take a couple extra steps. You have to say get query and then get result, and then you're going to have your result back. That's very simple and very straightforward there. Now, it offers criteria and expressions, which is what I mentioned earlier. So criteria is really just a collection of expressions, all the different parts of all the conditions of your criteria. So I have here, or I'm creating a criteria, then I go ahead and create an expression that I'm going to use. And there I can just say expression and X, and what that means is that anything I'm going to pass into this, into the arguments here, are all considered and. They're all going to be treated, together. And then the next one, I have find Frank, so I'm assuming that there's nobody in my database, I guess, that doesn't have K in their name. Otherwise, it's going to find them. It'll probably be something like Jack, right? But that's what I'm doing here. Contains, all. That's not a mistype. That's all, as in Frank Wallen. Not all. Like it's going to get all of them. So what I did here is said to find Frank, and then I got one to find Juliet, because I have a record too that's Juliet, another scientist. And then I could say the criteria where, and then another expression or X. And then I just drop in those two different expressions. And it says these are ORed together. So in this case, you know, I have, does this have a pointer on it?
Yes. Press the button.
Which button?
Yeah.
The middle one?
The only one press. Yeah.
Well, there's other buttons on here. Okay, cool. So here's one expression here, find Frank. Here's the other one here, find Juliet, and then we just dropped it into here. And Frank, you know, has a little more complicated expression, right? And Juliet here. But just by putting these together, I have now created my query, basically, to find the scientists that are Frank or Juliet. And then it'll return those to me. It's pretty cool. If you go to the Doctrine, documents, the expression object has a ton of methods. It's very, very powerful, and we can mess around with that too. So what I said earlier about the criteria object is that you can apply it to a collection, not just a query into your database. So you could have got a query, ran a query and got a whole, slew of entities. Now you have a collection of, 50 entities. But you want to refine it a little bit more. Maybe you do a couple operations. So you have your big group, and then you want to have a, different, subset of that group here, another subset of that group over here. Well, you can apply that criteria, the same one that you created before, you can apply it to your collection and filter it down. So that's what I think is a really awesome part, because programmatically you can create some very powerful criteria without writing any SQL either. That's what I think is really important. I mean, it's SQL is fine, but it's kind of heartbreaking, when you go into an app that you're supposed to fix and you got all this SQL, now you got to read it and figure out what's going on, And generally, the stuff here, I mean, personally, I think it's pretty straightforward. I mean, the expression contains, the first name, contains the last name. There's kind of they're self-documenting, right? Which is, I think, very useful. Deleting entities, very, very simple. It's a remove. However, you still have to do a flush. Anytime you want any of these transactions to happen in the database, you have to tell the entity manager to flush. We had a speaker some time ago, this guy from, was it Germany? He was German, but living in...
No, he was Italian, living in Germany.
Yeah, it was really weird. But I guess that's Europe, right? So, what he does, though, is he actually never calls the flush, but he does fire off events. So he can do he'll do a whole bunch of work, do all this work with entities, and then fire off this event that will then say flush. So everything gets handled at the same time, in one time. Generally, it sounds pretty easy, but of course, there's always going to be some caveats. There's so much more. Here's a link for the documents, so you guys can check that out. Do it, it's really good. Even if you don't use Doctrine, I think it's going to be good to just at least check it out and see what they're doing in there. And you'll start to see like some of the documentation for like their repositories or the entity manager. They got a lot of really good, powerful methods in there. And then of course I want to recommend again Laravel Doctrine. .org, that's their package, I think is the easiest. There are others out there, but when I was doing some looking into it, this is the one that is the most lively, actually has, I always go look at issues and go, when was the last time this guy handled an issue? You're like, oh, 2 years ago, and it was a misspelling. Okay, this guy doesn't care about this deal here, we're going to forget about it. This is pretty active, and I think it's an excellent choice. I think that's it for here. Now we can actually just go ahead and play around a little bit with I don't know if you can see, you can see that already. Okay, cool.
So Frank, I think I asked you this downtown. I'll ask you again here. With a framework like Laravel, and you already have active record.
Yeah.
What's your driving decision maker to look into leveraging something like that?
Thanks for asking the question. That's something I wanted to talk about. The reasons I would pick Doctrine is primarily if like scalability. Because the entities are so much thinner, they take up a lot less memory. You can have a lot more in memory if you need to. Caching is, I tried doing some caching. Now, mind you, I've done caching with Doctrine. Caching is never easy. If you think it's going to be easy, you're already wrong. You know, it may be simple getting started, but it's not. There's always something going to happen with that. It's so hard to know when to kill your cache, right? When it's got to be refreshed, all that kind of stuff. But Doctrine is very easy to cache, and actually it comes with a lot of support for it already. So I would say that if you're looking at something that's very scaled, that needs to be very scalable, that's going to get large, Doctrine is probably a good selection for that. On top of that, and I can point out some of the stuff on the document site if you'd like, it's very customizable. It's not hard to write your own functions for the query itself. So, there are some cases, and I've seen it even with Eloquent, there are some MySQL functions you're going to call that just don't want to behave in the query, and you have to use raw, right? DB raw to add this one little piece to your query. But in like Doctrine, you could write that into a function, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. It's very customizable that way. And events also, it handles tons of events. It's a great ORM, I think, for at least if you're looking to get really big. I mean, that's always a big decision to make. I'm not an expert on that. It's hard for me to tell you when exactly. But I know I have dealt with repositories that were holding on to thousands upon thousands of records, flying through them in memory, and it's so easy to just use up all your memory, with stuff you're not careful. But it's nice to have something that keeps it a nice thin entity, instead of something that's kind of a little bloated maybe. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you make this a little larger? Is that possible?
I don't know if let me see here.
There's settings.
Oh, yeah, I think,
Nope.
nope, not this one.
The settings I was expecting. Oh, this is in T,
Yeah.
There used to be a settings in PuTTY for fonts.
You think it's hotkeys? Let's see if we got something, right?
Control plus is switch between the application and active. Where'd you see that?
What do you see? You see it somewhere? None. Yeah. Let's see if that will do it. Oh, gave us that useful dialogue there. So I do want to say I'm sorry for you're going to see this is on Windows. This laptop is actually a dual boot. I do my real development on Linux, but I don't always have the confidence that my Linux box will happily connect to an HDMI or even my headphones sometimes, and stuff like that. So I always rely on Windows because it likes to happily connect to anything,
That's control plus.
But then, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what I can.
What about on the PHP, the buddy sessions on the left?
Yeah, we'll see.
You right click on that. Properties. Here, come on, give it to me. Come on! There we go. Wow. There we go. Hello.
No, I know that, but it's. I think it's under appearance.
There you go. Change. That's so
I know. See, this is why you develop on Linux, right? Because you just
You can up to about 20.
Or Mac, yeah.
See if it just, or you have to restart it. Oh, this is awesome. That's incredible in the window for you.
Yeah.
That's too big. Can you make it a little smaller, please?
Probably don't hit you.
You want me to?
No, don't listen to this guy. Hit the square though.
Yeah.
Um,
All right. So, let's see now. I think that I think status. When you work with something a long time, you get then you get away from it for a little bit, and all of a sudden you just forget everything. This is just the status here. So it's telling me that I've got 3 available migrations and 3 new ones. So I could just do artisan. Oops. I don't like this keyboard either. I could just do migrate, of course, and that would just run the whole gamut, and we'd be done. Or I can just say next, like I was talking about earlier. It's running a little slow on this because it's Windows. So it only ran the one. If we look back at status, of course, we'll see, just to show, 2 available, 1's been executed. So now I can go ahead and run the rest of them.
Is that executed just the session, or is that application file logged in? Is this a random application that has to be someone have only run out of total 3, or is that just 6 included in this console?
Well, yeah, because I only created as many as 3 migrations. If I could have had 25 migrations, and I wouldn't recommend stepping through them. What's that?
Where do you create the migration?
Well, you can. Two ways. You can use a diff, and that's based on all the changes you made to your entities. So if you add a new, let's say you want to add a new field to your table, right? You can just add this new property, do the definition, then just say diff it. What happened?
you're just happy, buddy.
Really?
Wolf 8 came up. You're like 6 volt. I don't know.
Interesting.
CIA watching.
They can watch me all they want. They ain't gonna see much, except maybe hear my complaints about what's going on right now.
Good.
So you can run a diff and it'll create the migration for you. And
So just to be clear, you create the entity.
yeah,
You do that commenting in the entity.
the annotations. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Of the validation of it, the length, what type it is.
Yeah.
From that entity, you can create the migration.
Yeah.
The migration's created.
It's generated for you. Yeah, and then it's usually done. I still recommend you go look at it, because maybe you want to tweak it a little bit or just make sure it's kosher, right?
So that would almost be like creating a model, kind of defining your validation of your model.
Yeah, you can do all that too. I didn't show that here, but you can do all kinds of validation in the annotations. I'm not a real big fan of that. Sometimes I think I just like to see that my entities are just entities. Validation, there's some validations are going to be used across the board all the time, but it doesn't seem like it's that many usually. So I'd rather do the validations in some other part of a business logic. No, nope, can't do that.
So you said there's 2 ways up. No.
Yeah, the other one's just generate, and then it'll go ahead and just create an empty migration for you. So then you have to fill it in yourself.
And does it, I believe you showed this to us before. It looks very much like the active record migration, right?
You can do it that way. That there is an option for that, a package for Doctrine, and I think Laravel Doctrine totally supports it. I think they call it Fluent, and so it's very much so. If you're totally comfortable with that, doing it that way, then you can do it that way. Personally, I just like doing it through my entities, and I don't like to have to worry about it too much. It just seems like I always forget. I'm always forgetting some little property or characteristic of that field that I wanted to add. So yeah, there's just really just the 2 ways. Either a diff or a generate. But I love the diff. It's a real saver. I mean, so many fewer headaches. things like that. So what we can do now, I think.
I'm sorry, Frank.
Yeah.
Not to keep hammering.
Yep.
Insomnia, but if let's say you define an entity, say it's a bar card, and you give it only 100 characters, and you
Yeah.
decide you run a migration, it creates it, and you decide all you need it to be your 255 characters.
Yeah.
You update that
Yeah.
in your entity. Doctrine is smart enough to realize that annotation's been updated and creates a migration for that.
Yeah. And so it'll make the change to the length.
Interesting.
If you've defined it at 100 and you're going to change it to 255.
That's interesting.
You know, this is why I say you got to check your stuff, because if let's say you said 255 originally and you drop it to 100, and what if your users or whatever, you could just truncate 100 characters of data, which is pretty bad, so which I know I've done. So
Do you know where it's storing a copy that's a good idea?
well, what Doctrine does, and these are the caveats, it uses metadata. So it's really just creating from the annotations. It'll create actually this little fast loading class that defines how it's all connected. So that's where it's being stored there. I mean, is that
It probably does. There's a metadata file somewhere. Once it creates a div, it stores that so the next time it gives that.
Yeah, I mean, basically, that's created. The metadata is always being created first, and that's what it's living off of. That's what drives it. So that's one of those things that if you're going to be for performance, it's important. Metadata caching is usually very common with Doctrine. For one, it's not often that your entities will probably change, significantly. But at least in a production environment, the metadata has been cached and it's going to be stayed pretty quick. Let's see if I can. Just get rid of this bad boy. So right now, this is this number 0712 was the very first. I think that was the very first one. Or is that the second one? Yeah, it looks like that. Next version. But these are the new ones. So it should actually go backwards. Yeah. So you can see that, originally when it went up, it went from 5234 right to 5729, and then back down the other way. That to me is really cool. I mean, yeah.
So your actual database has changed.
Yeah.
You've lost tables.
Yeah, you've lost those tables. Yeah.
It rolled back as a migration, maybe, because when you did rollback, I noticed on the other screen it said rolled back.
Yeah.
Instead of migrated.
Well, it'll say migrated. Yeah, if I say rollback, it's going to say it's rollback, but it's just here in this case, it's saying it's migrated because what it's doing is it's traversing backwards to a migration and it's stopping there. So it's left my first one that I had, and so you can go backwards the other way. Because I mean, I've had situations where I've had maybe 100 migrations, and that's quite a few to sit through sometimes. But you can look them up, find very specifically which one you want to get to, and it's been a real help. It's been a godsend for me, anyways. It's been pretty helpful. Honestly, when I started working with Eloquent, I felt very sad because I didn't have the kind of migrations that I was used to with Doctrine, But on the other hand, as I said earlier, Eloquent's like the grease slide, It's just really easy to use, and that's the beautiful part about it.
How is it in comparison for performance? You're saying obviously they fit an entity for memory.
Yeah.
But as soon as you end up putting any kind of abstraction on top of the SQL, you're going to have some performance hits. Whether it's
Yeah.
or Doctrine.
Right.
In your experience, how does that go?
If you're not going to handle your metadata right, which is the kind of the blueprint for the entity, right? you should let, it should be cached. That does make a big difference because now it doesn't have to recreate that file, right? Go and scan your file, all your entity files, and create this deal. So you can have those bottlenecks like that. Generally speaking, Doctrine's pretty performant. They did a really good job. The unit of work in the repositories saves a lot because it's going to, you shouldn't be persistent entity flush, persist flush, persist flush. You should not do that. You should persist. If you have a list of 50 of them, persist those and then flush it. And then it's going to do those at one time. So it's less hits to the database. It saves that there. And then being thin entities, it's pretty quick for that too. I haven't done a comparison on performance, but
Do you mind if I ask a follow-up?
yeah.
I suppose like the scenario that I have in my head is I would just using eager loading, lazy loading in order to make sure that pseudo ensuring
Yeah.
that it's going to get that database as little as possible, grab a pipe of different
Yeah.
entities from all over the place, right?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, I've seen it done, but when it's done intelligently here, it does only fire off sometimes in one instance where element 125, whether it's counting then, execute or. So I'm just kind of wondering how.
Right. Yeah. If you want to avoid the successive hits to your database, right, then you definitely want to do eager loading, and it's just as easy as just in the relationship. When you define the relationship for another entity, you can just specify eager loading, and from there on, it's going to always be eager loaded. So it'll do, at that point, when you go to load that one entity, it's going to do one query to get that all its data, and then hydrate your entities. So that does save time. On the other hand, now because you're eager loading, you're pulling extra stuff, so it can get cumbersome. I think it's the same with Eloquent. Eloquent lets you do lazy loading or eager loading also, and it just helps to say loaded. That's why you do with, right? Because that's just the same as saying this is eager. Load these up. Although Eloquent does have that nice feature. After you've got your model, you can say load and give it a list of all its relationships, and then it'll load those too. Doctrine uses proxies for the associated entities, and so basically it's just a little class that doesn't have anything in it, and then when you ask for that data, it runs out and it'll hit the database. So you do have to be aware of that. I think that's kind of the reality, anyways. For any time you're working with databases, you just have to really be aware of that stuff. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. How powerful is the QueryBuilder to see if you're using MySQL? You want to go to NoSQL. How much revising you have to do to the QueryBuilder?
I don't know. It's very smart. The Doctrine's very smart. As long as you didn't do any kind of custom SQL, you're probably going to be better off. But I've never done that myself. That sounds like a fun experiment, actually, to see what happens. It depends on the drivers. It's got a bunch of drivers for different systems. To use different databases. So it's going to have that NoSQL one also. You can use that, I suppose. I haven't done it with Doctrine. NoSQL. There was something I wanted to mention about that. Yeah, I can't remember now. So, any other questions? No? Oh, yeah? No.
So you were touching a little earlier on collections.
Yeah.
Does Doctrine have its own kind of collection? Like right now, if you look at Eloquent, you have the Eloquent model collection.
Yep.
And then you have a collection, both that have different methods. You do a lot of cross-pollination.
Oh.
But sometimes you have a little bit of this here, a little bit of this there, so it's a little easiest way to use where. Is a collection in this reference
A doctrine collection. So technically it's an array collection, but it's for using for all across the board basically. Yeah. I've never had to extend the collection object, but I have with the repositories a lot. You can extend those, add to that. The customization, it's pretty exciting, I think, for the of us that get excited by weird stuff like that. So I was telling my wife, I did it. She's like, what'd you do? I got to connect. I got this data from here. And she's like, you don't understand. This means so much to me. Anyhow.
In databases, there are people that go with MySQL preferred and then tell me why to use NoSQL. There's people that say we use NoSQL so you can just actually use a relational database.
Yeah.
Where are you at when it comes to Docker versus Eloquent? Are you always going to use Docker before Eloquent, unless there's a reason, or vice versa?
I think as long as I'm working in Laravel, I will use Eloquent first. Because it works with it. There's no, it works. It's good. It's true. It's been tried. It's true. It does what it's supposed to do. I think if I started getting into maybe where I had to start thinking about dealing with larger amounts of data, maybe I might start to rethink it. It really depends on the project and going in. I used to have the approach that if it was going to be a big, it was going to need to be a big app, then I wouldn't use Laravel. But I've been using Laravel now. I don't know how long I've been working with it. Maybe the one we're working on. That thing's massive. So, boy, you want nostalgia, man. You look at that thing. So it'll take you back. No. I don't know if you've ever seen the old Star Trek episodes. There was one episode they had this thing called the Medusa. It was really like these aliens called the Medusas, and she came in a box, And there was a woman, and she was blind. They didn't know this because she could look at the Medusa. Anybody else who looked at it you'd lose your mind. I think that's what that app is like. You open up that box and look in there. That's it. You're forever changed. You might as well stay here. Absolutely.
I had to go through this exact thing from one of the ones I'm doing. It's a rewrite of a 10-year-old code base that we had several hands on. The database is literally smashed into 6 separate ones that were smashed into one. So there's never been anywhere and nothing's really in the right hands. I made the mistake to go with Eloquent on this one when I should have gone with the data mapper simply put, because with data mapper I'm able to look at what was in the old one and transition it to the new one and actually be able to find the relationships without the persistence layer entering, knowing the difference. So when I'm eventually trying to strangle out the different parts of this monstrosity, I now have to really do a lot of back work in terms of creating specific models for the database, transitioning through a custom layer, if you will, that ends up translating old to new, and there's persistence issues, there's duplication is enough. So take notes if we want to change that database.
Is that right?
Database is horrible.
It is. It is.
So,
At least.
They're missing where Doctor would have helped you.
Specifically the data map versus the phrase where
Active record. Yeah.
active record.
Yeah. Where it's more tightly.
Yeah.
Cut. Yeah. Yeah.
It used to actually loose and cut more loose.
Yeah. Yeah. Data mappers. Yeah. Plus, I know Doctrine has there's support for it to generate entities from your schema, also. So that can make a big difference.
People literally use a lot of their SQL, raw SQL from their practice system and my new system.
Yeah.
Database scheme. Outside of the joins and stuff that have to be redone, the where clause, all of that stuff could have been just literally copy and pasted. For the most part.
Yeah. And also the QueryBuilder has a couple layers in it, but one of them they call it DQL, so it's a database query language, I think, and it's modeled off of like Java query language, I think. But it's a higher level, so to speak, of regular SQL, and it references model, like your entity class name specifically rather than like the tables, things like that. So you can take that stuff, put it through sometimes, and and find a better better way to do it, maybe, or at least better for that system. So, caching, I'll say that because we all think about performance, and caching is like almost the only way to really, yeah.
Okay, so, sorry. It's true.
He's polite.
I'm sorry. So, actually, this is new. I mean, I've played with this stuff for a long time, but I never actually thought about it until you mentioned the amount or size of the objects as they're flying through
Yeah.
real memory. And maybe, I don't know if yourself or somebody else can chime in specifically on the eloquent side of a version of this. If you have a model that has a bunch of methods and everything else inside of that model, does that actually bring in sort of rough on an individual like lookup basis, or where do you end up getting all of this extra memory usage just because it's like start and everything you bring it across?
Yeah.
Or is it actually where does the extra
Well, I'm going to guess that it's not the model itself that's being really replicated, multiple times. I think that's probably opcode or cached, things like that. But there's going to be like one instance of that class. The rest of it's all really just data. I don't know how to explain this right, but I mean, you could be looking at a dump and you see all these classes, but really, as far as the system, the computer is concerned, it's really just a bunch of data, and it's connected to this class over here, this one instance or whatever, So, but it's really just the amount of data that you're going to have in that object, and by having something tightly coupled, it's going to have connection information in there. It's going to have all these different, all that extra stuff because it kind of lives on its own. You pull it out of the database and it knows where it came from and how to get back and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, the entities in Doctrine are not as smart, but they are cleaner.
So it basically, like with the active record model, you end up having persistent for connection for
Yeah.
updating the background stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and plus, active record doesn't really lend itself to repositories very well. Because it's trying to do all that stuff itself. So when I found examples of repositories in using Eloquent, there's really just one model. You have a repository and you load it up, but it's really just one model in there. And, that's it's being affected by all the query, changes you're doing against it and all that too. So you have to kind of manage that stuff. But yeah. I guess that's it. Question? Thank you.